Hello and welcome to the CHGO Fire podcast. I'm Alex Campbell, and it is Inter Miami week for the Chicago Fire. Will Messi play, and who's going to be available to play for the injury-riddled Fire? We'll talk to the radio voices of both teams to break it down. This is CHGO Fire, presented by Sunnyside. Visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases when you enter promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 plus or Illinois medical card holders. Welcome to everybody joining us live on the CHGO YouTube page or listening wherever you get your podcasts. And I am joined for the first half of our show today by a friend in professional yapping, a friend of this show, and you can hear him alongside Dason Robinson on AM 890 WLS for Chicago Fire radio broadcast. Max Toma, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you and appreciate you making the virtual pilgrimage the week you're making a physical move.
Yeah, it's been a very hectic time. Most of the apartment right now is all boxes. Professional yapper. I love it, just like yourself. And Alex, it's a thrill to be back on the show, as always.
So before we get into the weekend and the Messi and the Miami of it all, we do have to briefly address the Fire's last 2 games. A bit disappointing, a 1-1 draw against Montreal in just horrible classic spring Chicago weather, and then a loss 2-1 in New Jersey to the Red Bulls. And I don't know about you, I think they played a whole lot better in the loss than in the draw of those 2 games. But man, they just keep losing guys due to injury. Thinking about these last 2 weeks and this kind of speed bump the Fire have hit, what's sticking with you reflecting on the 2 90-minute periods we've seen?
I mean, yeah, first of all, good weather has been evasive for this team all season long. Even in Dallas, I mean, it was just raining the majority of the game, right? But yeah, I think certainly better last week in the 2-1 defeat in Harrison, New Jersey than they were at home. The Montreal game, you kind of never know what you're going to get and what you're going to face when you're playing against a side that has just sacked their manager, right? And a lot of times the team rallies and actually plays, better than they have at any point in the season up until that point. But, I mean, yeah, the game last weekend was so frustrating because it just felt like they were trying to feel things out early. I thought Tehran looked very shaky in those first 10 minutes. Obviously, the Fire, what's mainly been sticking out the last handful of weeks is you haven't had the 3 preferred midfielders. And now all of a sudden, as they get healthier in the midfield, it has just basically shifted down, right? And now it's at almost every spot on the back line. You're kind of nervous about what that injury report is going to look like. But the Fire looked really good when they get the goal. We've all been waiting for a Bamba goal. We've kind of been, imploring him to maybe be a little bit more selfish because he just looks so dynamic, creative. I love his vision as well. But, he gets the goal, and then all of a sudden Rodgers comes off, and you get back-to-back goals allowed. And then a great second half. They just never found that goal. And, we've watched soccer for decades, right? I thought the Fire probably outplayed New York Red Bulls, but at the end of the day, couldn't get a point. I thought we got really drastically outplayed by Montreal, but, found a way to salvage something from that one.
Yeah, on the Montreal note, St. Louis City found that out this past weekend when they took on state rival Sporting KC, who have been just abysmal. They just fired Peter Vermes, and Dejan Joveljic remembered where the goal was, scored 2 goals, SKC get a win. But yeah, in the second half of that Red Bull game, to use a hockey analogy, sometimes you just run into a hot goaltender, and Carlos Coronel, was the MLS Team of the Week goalkeeper for a reason. He had a really good game. And, as the phrase goes, sometimes ball go in and sometimes ball doesn't go in. And this was a ball doesn't go in sort of week for the Fire. You mentioned that Jonathan Bamba goal, though. I mean, that's the best combo of that front 3 we've seen. Kuiper's dropping a bit deep, holding things up, quick pass to Zinkernagel. Zinkernagel finds the through ball to Bamba. He does the rest. But yeah, I mean, the back line, I mean, right now, we've got to see how the week goes, but they had no right backs available. So Justin Reynolds, who's kind of a both sides fullback utility guy, he had a really tough first opening 15 minutes. And, luckily for him in the Fire, it didn't result in any goals. But, Carlos Terran coming back looks shaky. Sam Rogers has to go off injured. That brings on Omar Gonzalez getting his first, significant minutes as a player on this Fire team. And yeah, we're waiting to see, what does it say next to Jack Elliott's name when the injury report comes out on Friday? What about Sam Rogers? What about Leo Barroso? Is Brian Gutierrez getting any closer to health? And I actually wanted to get your take on, I kind of think we've got three big things in terms of availability that are kind of the headlines. And I'm curious which one of you think's the biggest concern. The fact that Barroso can't stay fit and the team is just so much better, at least in possession with him out there. Guti can't stay available for whatever reason. It's been a couple of different problems so far this season. And now the center backs are having fitness issues. Which of those for you is the loudest alarm for this team right now?
I would say the center backs, especially given the caliber of the opposition we're about to be facing, whether Messi is available and playing the full 90 or not, and, what happens in their game versus LAFC tomorrow. But obviously the biggest blemish for the Fire, I mean, I've been saying up top, a rising tide lifts all ships, and the additions of Bamba and Zinkernagel have really brought out the Ugo Kuipers that Chicago Fire fans were probably hoping to get from the jump last year. He's looked like an entirely different player this season. Dangerous in front of goal, not just poachers finishes, but great in the buildup, getting out wide, setting up other guys in the area too. But this team is, without a clean sheet at this point in the season, even though they'll have stretches where the defense looks great and, even games where they look very comfortable and confident in possession and in defending with the lead or behind, there's these moments, and it's kind of been, what's happened with the Fire a lot the last few years, where it only really takes a bad moment or two to change the entire course of a game, right? And that's exactly what we saw in microcosm against Red Bulls over the weekend, was just, Acosta with kind of a clumsy foul, and then a goal against the run of play. All of a sudden, you don't pick up Goma in the box. He heads it in. We're level. A few minutes later, we're down, and, it's tough to play behind, especially on the road.
No, absolutely. I mean, and you mentioned, the extenuating circumstances, and we'll get into this here on the podcast today with Ken LaVicka from down in Miami later about how, they've got LAFC tomorrow in CONCACAF Champions League. They're trailing 1-0 going into that second leg. They didn't rotate at all over the weekend against Toronto, and it didn't matter. They only got a point out of that game anyway. So, again, we know to never take it as a given thing in Chicago that Messi is going to show up. But, reflecting on the two games he has missed, 2 years ago, Miami were still pretty bad when Messi had just shown up. Fire beat him 4-1. That game included 2 goals from Xherdan Shaqiri and 2 from Marin Haile Selassie. And then last year, Miami just blitzes the Fire, wins 4-1, 2 goals by Luis Suarez. The Fire are also, though, just a better team than they were the last couple of years. If we get into the case where Inter Miami rotates a bit, is it fair to put some level of expectation, maybe not on a specific result, but on a quality of performance from the Fire in this game?
I think so. I mean, because this is not only the game, this is really the couple of games, because, I mean, it's 4 or 5 in a row at home. It's great to be back at Soldier Field consistently over the next month plus, but you welcome Miami, you welcome Cincinnati. These are 2 of the forces in the East. It's a great kind of litmus test times 2, if you will, because obviously the Fire have been sitting, around that top 5 for a handful of weeks. They've looked awesome on the field, but now you get to go against the best and see really what you're made of, and especially, I mean, if the back line, which is very much in question right now, it's kind of a, who exactly knows who's going to be fully fit and healthy, who's going to start, who's available to come off the bench. But I think if Miami's rotated, and keep in mind, we played Saturday, right? They played Sunday night soccer. Then they have Wednesday matchup. And then obviously we play Sunday again, but you're talking 3 games in a span of 8 days for them. And, 1 over that same stretch really for us. So it's hard to complain too much about the injuries when you're going to be facing a side that, could be tired at this point in the season. It's tough when you're in CONCACAF Champions Cup to be playing so consistently.
No, right. Absolutely. And you mentioned where the Fire are floating around. We'll take a look at the Eastern Conference standings here in a moment. But just to go through, the run the Fire have ahead of them: Miami, Cincinnati, Nashville, Orlando, Atlanta, Charlotte, NYC, Orlando again. That is the schedule from now until the end of May. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see right now the Eastern Conference standings. Miami with the game in hand, 1 point back of Columbus. It's just kind of a pile-up. Philly, Charlotte, Cincinnati, Orlando, Fire. The Red Bulls win over the Fire, gets them in to this group. And, I think on the one hand, Max, it's the question is, did the Fire get enough points on the board from the games they have played so far? Or, is the fact that they're looking strong in a lot of respects, should that be reason for confidence? How are you feeling, as somebody who watches this team every week? How do you think fans should be feeling going into what is on paper a pretty difficult stretch of games?
I mean, there's absolutely plenty of reason. We've seen a big enough sample size to be very confident about this group going forward. And obviously, we've thrown out the word, Dayside and I, gauntlet coming up, but it's nice to at least be experiencing that gauntlet on home turf. But this team has displayed not only, flashes and moments like teams in years past, but lengthy stretches of more entertaining and just a better brand of soccer than what we have seen, certainly since Dayside and I took over, 2.5 years ago. This team seeing out results with the lead has been as comfortable as I've ever seen it. And then being so dangerous, even when they don't have the ball, just that movement back to front where it's just one pass to Bamba. He's looking towards his own goal. He's looking to Brady and he flicks it back over his own head. All of a sudden, Gutman's released. You think that chance has gone by and he somehow finds Zinkernagel who gets the goal. But there's just so much danger on this team, so much, just depth and dynamic players who are versatile. A healthy Gutman has kind of been flying under the radar, I feel like. On that left side, his combination with him and Bamba, and then, when healthy, Barroso on the other side with Zinkernagel. I mean, there's just so much good feelings watching this team. And it almost sounds strange to hear like the national media talking about how potent the Fire have looked and how competent the Fire have looked, because this team looks comfortable with possession. They look lethal when they're leading in games, in adding on in counter situations. And there's an optimism that I have not felt yet, that I am feeling this year, where it seems so simple to say, but it just feels like good things are going to happen late in game, whether down, ahead, or level. I mean, look at that Dallas game where down 1-0, truly hadn't played well in a long time, but you felt like there was still a chance there, and then all of a sudden the coin flipped. Barroso gets a huge goal, and then the kind of clumsy PK that Kuipers draws. But there's just a sense around the team, and I think in the fan base now, and certainly in the broadcast booth, that positive things are happening, and expectations are starting to be following suit, right? There's not this premonition where you're just kind of waiting for some terrible moment that, has been unfortunately what this team and fan base has experienced a lot of late.
Yeah, no, I absolutely feel that. And I want to shout out our producer behind the scenes, Sean Anderson, who's been working hard with production stuff for the show today, just to kind of visualize how many games Fire players have missed, because I want to touch on this before we get you out of here, Max. I mean, Chris Mueller's non-soccer related, so he's kind of the headline with seeing 7 there, and I don't even have Chase Gasper on here, who's missed 7 as well, because it feels like he's not really in the project. But Gutierrez 4, Kouame 4, Tehran 4, Acosta now 3, Barroso 3. I mean, it's, again, you mentioned the midfield's getting healthy, the defense now feels it's struggling. There is this excitement, and to mirror it to Berhalter's time as the men's national team coach, there's this feeling of, oh man, when everyone's on the field together and when everyone's available at the same time, man, this could look really great. Of course, with the men's national team, that basically never happened, and more or less somebody was always hurt. But on the Berhalter note, I mean, we haven't had a chance to hear your thoughts on this, of course, but what have your impressions been? What have you made of the soccer he's playing, that's given some optimism? And you mentioned Andrew Gutman already, though, but is there any player who's been a pleasant surprise under Greg Berhalter who you think's really taken a big step?
Well, first of all, I think just like a cohesive unit and a style of play that has really been brought to this club here in 2025 has been a pleasant sight. I mean, Greg, as we know with the national team, gets the best out of and is very unafraid of using talented, youthful players who may be inexperienced. And we've seen that a lot with Orahel and with Williams. In terms of being impressed, I mean, Sergio Orahel in that opener, I thought I don't want to be too harsh. He looked kind of lost at times, right? I thought he directly kind of led to one of the goals that was allowed, kind of indirectly to one of the other ones as well. So 2 of the 4, he was at least somewhat responsible, lost his man on one of them. And then just kind of, the error between him and Brady just in front of the own goal. But Sergio, I thought he has really come on. He shook somebody, I can't remember who it was, on CF Montreal, just out of their boots. They had to just professional foul, pull him from behind and draw yellow. That man is just oozing with talent and really starting to come into his own and getting a lot of run with the injuries that we've seen in the midfield. Unfortunately, we haven't talked about Guti too much because this felt like it was going to be the year of Guti, in my opinion. He started last year with that banger from outside the 18 versus Philly, and you thought it was going to be a banner year, and it didn't really fully develop and come to fruition. But then this year, he gets 2 in the opener. He's getting some time in January with the national team, and you just think this is going to be his coming out party of a season. And now, he got the delayed suspension that happened, after the match, obviously, then misses on international duty, comes back with an injury. And there's nobody else on this team that really fits his spot and can play the 10 with the style that he does. He adds so much to this team, and they need him back out there.
Yeah, it's why that, we'll talk about the breaking news this week regarding Kevin De Bruyne in Miami, but, it's why the Fire are a team that says, man, if you can find somebody who can be a 10 or kind of an inside right winger where Zinkernagel's playing, the Fire are a team that makes sense to go after a designated player like that. Thomas Muller from Bayern Munich, his name has been floated as a guy who would be perfect for that, but we're just going to have to wait and see, and we will see what the Fire look like on Sunday, who's lining up on the other side for Miami, and you can hear Max Toma and Dason Robinson call the game both on WLS AM 890, or if you're watching on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV, you can toggle to the home radio audio option on your stream. Max, thanks again so much for taking the time. Good luck with the move, and we'll hear you this weekend.
Thanks so much. You never know. Maybe Haile Selassie's back at left back again. So you just truly never know what it's going to look like out there.
We've seen stranger things. So, yeah, time will tell. But, yeah, thanks, Max, so much. And appreciate your time back here on CHGO Fire.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex.
And now we're going to make a pretty quick transition here from one radio voice to another. In a minute, we're going to be bringing in Ken LaVicka all the way from Miami. Ken is a Chicago native of all things, and that's an interesting wrinkle and makes this ideal for him to join us now. Ken, thanks so much for taking the time. Glad to have you virtually back home here in the Windy City.
Alex, it's good to talk to you. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I can feel the Chicago-ness through my my screen right now. But as someone who I feel like prime of your sports life as a kid is like 8, 9, 10 years old. The Fire were birthed in that really apex of my fandom. It's cool to be able to call a match involving the Fire from a professional standpoint this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. Because I did want to ask you about that. You grew up in the golden years, to your point, of the Fire, the Frank Klopas, Ante Razov, Peter Novak, Bob Bradley led glory years. You worked as an intern at then Toyota Park in that building's early days. I know as broadcasters, we aren't fans in the same way that we might have been as kids, but, what significance would you say the Fire as just a team holds for you in your personal sports journey?
Listen, I was 9 years old when the 94 World Cup happened, and the very first match was at Soldier Field. And I remember thinking to myself, man, this is really, really something. And at that time, I'm a White Sox fan. So you're coming off of them winning the AL West in 93. You've got the front end. You had the first 3 Bulls championships that just happened. And so then the World Cup comes in, and it was tough for something to take my attention away from Frank Thomas or from a retiring Michael Jordan. And then there's the World Cup. And after that, I was hooked. And then the Fire come to be, and they win immediately, beat DC United at the Rose Bowl in the very first year to win the MLS Cup. So for me, it does hold a special place in my heart. And so, just funny backstory with so I did work as an intern with the Fire back when Toyota Park was being put up in Bridgeview, and the majority of my job was to go around to local grocery stores and ensure residents of Bridgeview that traffic wasn't going to be too gridlocked on match nights. That was really my purpose. And then I'd go out there. I go to Soldier Field on game nights, and I believe that Pumas came in for a match, which was a big deal that summer that I did that. But I went to Valparaiso University in Northwest Indiana, and I got caught 2 months before I was 21 underage drinking, and my community service was with the Fire. We had a family friend who let me come in and serve as an intern to pay my debt to society. So that's that. I don't run afoul of the law much, but I did, and the Fire were there as my parachute. So thank you, Chicago Fire, in a multitude of ways.
And yeah, and here you are today. I do have to say that you're in good company. Both myself in front of the camera and Sean Anderson behind it are lifelong suffering White Sox fans as well. So we also have that in common.
Yes! Yes! Hell yeah!
What?
Yeah. Excellent work. Thank you, Sean. To get back to the soccer, though, we're gonna kind of do this in a weird order because I want to start with the breaking news from yesterday. That is that Inter Miami, in the weird way that this league works, have the rights to Man City's Kevin De Bruyne, who announced recently that this will be his last season in Manchester. MLS is one of a handful of locations that he could end up, but if he does come stateside, it will either be to Miami or a team will have to pay Inter Miami probably a not trivial sum of money for the rights to sign him. Outside of Miami, I think you'd understand, Ken, it's pretty easy to be really cynical about this sort of thing. But for Inter Miami and Miami fans, this is an incredibly exciting opportunity to maybe somehow make this star-studded team even shinier and more star-studded.
Yeah, let me be abundantly clear. I understand the cynicism, but as someone in the Inter Miami universe, deal with it. Get your money up is what I say. So for me, from an Inter Miami standpoint, yeah, Kevin De Bruyne, and it's to a point where Inter Miami is going to be brought up as a destination side anytime one of these international stars at least starts to flirt with the idea of coming to the States. And yes, you have the discovery rights, but Inter Miami is always going to be at least floated as an ideal destination, whether it's for a Paul Pogba who's been hanging around different MLS venues over the last several weeks, or in this spot, Kevin De Bruyne, or an Angel Di Maria, who has been really linked with Inter Miami over the last couple of months as well. I look at this situation, and the immediate question I was getting from Inter Miami fans, Alex, was, well, could he be available for the Club World Cup? And it appears as if the answer is no to that. He's not going to be available until late June. There are going to be a lot of machinations, and The Athletic laid it out very nicely this morning about some of the roster manipulation that's going to have to happen, because right now, as it stands, if you're going to bring in De Bruyne this season, you already have your 3 DPs. There's no room for him, and I saw it suggested that maybe there's an Ibrahimovic, LA Galaxy type of deal that will become to where you have a certain amount of money and then you promise him the DP spot, or maybe you move Jordi Alba into a TAM roster situation. I don't know. That's far above my pay grade. That said, De Bruyne, from a pure football perspective, would play a big part and fill a big position of need in the attacking midfield for Inter Miami. The attack has been fine, but you look at Luis Suarez right now, he hasn't scored run of play in the last 7. He hasn't scored period since a penalty back end, the second leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup against Cavalier in Kingston on a penalty conversion. And so it's being left to the last couple of matches. If it's not Messi, it's nobody. If it is him not setting up a teammate or him not scoring, the attack has really struggled. And you have capable attackers like a Fafa Pico, who started in the 1-1 draw against Toronto. You have Telasco Segovia. You have a Robert Taylor, but something's missing right now in the attack, and it really has been the case since the road win 3 weeks ago, Sunday Night Football against Atlanta United. Not having Tadeo Allende since then. He got injured on that artificial surface there in Atlanta. That has not helped the cause at all, because the young Argentine has really come on strong, but he did participate in training in full for the first time in several weeks today. So it looks like some help might be on the horizon. But long story short, Kevin De Bruyne, he would definitely help, but it's not going to come until midsummer, it appears.
Right, and I'll be interested to see, and again, a shout out to that reporting. That was Paul Tenorio of The Athletic, another Chicagoan himself. Chicago connections all over this show today. Obviously the story for a while had been that San Diego was lining up De Bruyne, and you wonder if the fact that they are so much better, I'm sure if you ask them off the record, no one in San Diego thought they were going to be this good this fast. And so you wonder if they said to themselves, okay, if they held the rights, they would have gotten a nice chunk of money for them, and they might have decided they could go elsewhere. The other team that immediately comes up is NYCFC, obviously of the City Football Group universe. They are currently playing a 38-year-old Maxi Morales as their starting number 10. So there's an obvious fit there too. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We have somehow gotten 10 minutes into a discussion about Inter Miami without talking about Messi, which I think we deserve some sort of award for. We certainly hope that we will see him at Soldier Field this Sunday after he has not been here the last 2 years. He's now in his 21st season as a fully professional footballer. He has played over 700 games for club and country. As somebody who's watching him up close, how does he look to you? And what's it been like also as a broadcaster to get to watch, the greatest player of all time week in and week out as your job?
It is an absolute honor. And so if anybody's ever covered, this is going to be a weird analogy, but covered high school sports, high school football in particular, you always see the power school Division I athlete amongst the little 5'7", gonna go play some rec league in college type of athletes, right? Like it's just immediate. You can see it. Messi, even with Suarez on the pitch, even with Busquets on the pitch, even with Jordi Alba, even against Toronto the other night, a Bernadeschi or an Insigne, Messi just stands out, stands alone. Even at his age, late 30s, approaching 40, he glides on the pitch. His runs are impeccable. His vision is still there. Does he have the unbelievable endless motor that he used to? No, and that's not reasonable to expect that that's going to be able to be maintained. But as far, I almost feel like it's Jordan late career when he developed the fadeaway, the mid-range fadeaway, to account for his athleticism, his jumping ability starting to fade. Messi has now compensated with being as pinpoint precise as he possibly can at all moments, off the ball and on the ball. So it's a ton of fun to watch. Everything with him is an absolute chess match. And let's be honest, he's playing an extremely high level still, and he's still got the same passion. He scored in the last 3 MLS matches. He has contributed to 8 goals and 8 appearances this season after the Tour of America's exhibition campaign ended for Inter Miami. So as far as him playing in Chicago, and that is always, and Alex, that's the question I get the most about Inter Miami is he going to play? So what I'll say is that I wouldn't take a ton of stock in them playing second leg CONCACAF Champions Cup on Wednesday night, because I did not think that Messi was going to play, and if he did, it would be maybe a half against Toronto. Next thing you know, 90 minutes after pulling 90 in the first leg out in Southern California. The man wants to play. The man feels healthy. The man also, and this is what I respect about Messi, he gets it from a legacy standpoint. He did not have to play at Cavalier with the Champions League round of 16 wrapped up in Kingston, and he did it because it meant something. He's never played at Soldier Field. He's never played in Chicago. I do think that there is a space in his mind where that means something for a soccer-crazy city like this when a big event is taking place. So I definitely would go on the better side of 50% that Messi would show face and play at Soldier Field.
I do have to say there, his one notable appearance at Soldier Field was 30 minutes as a sub in the Copa America Centenario in 2016. He, of course,
Right.
he scored 4 goals in those 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So
that was his one outing, but he from an MLS perspective, I think he takes on the responsibility, and he's never appeared in an MLS match, and I think that means something to him.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. You brought up the fact that he played 90 against Toronto. Obviously, Javier Mascherano is in his first year as Inter Miami head coach. It is his first team management job of his career. Of course, the fact that he is a personal friend of Messi's raised, a few eyebrows when that announcement was made. What have you made of him in the early stages of his tenure, and what do you think the biggest thing he's still learning is as a coach?
I think sometimes it's tough when you're the same age as the players that you're coaching, especially if you're just past your playing days, to immediately come in and command a presence in the training room. And Javier Mascherano's done an outstanding job of being a player's manager, but also everybody understands that he's the one making the final decisions. But he gets it as well. He's not going to come in and be a tyrant and say, this is my way. There is a very clear line of communication between him and his former teammates, Messi and Suarez and Busquets and Alba. And he's good for the young players, especially the young Argentines, several of them who he coached in the Olympics that are now on this Inter Miami side. So I think he's done a very nice job. I think maybe he wishes front end against LAFC, that first leg last Wednesday, he might have started substituting and making some changes tactically a little bit earlier in the second half. But for the most part, he's pushed a lot of the right buttons. He's put the right players on the pitch. And even early on, there's been good development from the youngsters. And I think that reflects extremely well on Javier Mascherano, who's been nothing but a professional and conducts himself like someone who's been at this for a decade, as opposed to just a couple of years on the touchline and a first year from a professional perspective.
Right, and again, because I think questions have come up about, MLS is such an arduous league with the travel schedule, and we talk about players having to get used to that. Managers do too, and so it's got this week in particular, having started everybody against Toronto in a game they don't end up winning. With a game on Wednesday night, they're going to try against LAFC, going against a Fire team that's better than it's been, and who you can't just rotate everybody against and think you're going to come out of Chicago with 3 points. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, they're really damn good. They're a contender for everything this season, every trophy they're competing for. And, no matter who you're a fan of, Messi continues to be fun to watch. Before I let you go, Ken, I do have to ask, because this has come up in a couple discussions. I know this is not how you say his name, but as one broadcaster to another, where does Max Falcon rank in all-time great names you have gotten to say as a broadcaster?
It's so good. And so the thing is, you can call him Maximiliano Falcone, and that's cool. And then there's Max Falcone, which is cool. And then there's the name he most consistently goes by, and that's Maxi Falcone. And there might be, I do Division I football and basketball at Florida Atlantic here in South Florida as well. And I have called many, many, many interesting names, some difficult, some roll off the tongue, some are really cool. Maxi Falcone, it might be the easiest, coolest name to pronounce on a regular basis of anyone that I've ever called in a 20-year pro broadcasting career. Maxi Falcone is awesome, and he looks like a Maxi Falcone with his flowing hair. He just sort of owns the space. There aren't many people that could pull off being named Maxi Falcone, and he's definitely one of the few.
Yeah, I mean, however you say it, it's fun to say, and he's a guy who, and he's been a big deal in his career, because, I mean, he's been a mainstay for Colo-Colo, one of the biggest clubs in Chile for years at this point. So, this is a guy who knows he's got a cool name, and you're right, looks like it. Well, Ken, it's been really cool to talk to you today. Really appreciate you taking the time. The Chicago connections just make this even that little bit better. Have a good call on Sunday, and thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll have to do this again sometime when it makes sense and when Messi may or may not once again be gracing us with his presence.
When it's July and the White Sox have won 10 times, go ahead and call me up, and we'll talk that and maybe a little bit of Messi after that.
Fair enough. You've got a deal. Well, thanks, Ken, so much, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Alex. Appreciate you, man.
And that is going to do it for this episode of CHGO Fire. Thank you to Max. Thank you to Ken. Again, if you're a Fire fan, you can listen to Max and Dason Robinson on WLS AM 890 or toggle to the home audio function on Apple MLS Season Pass. And Ken is on ESPN. ESPN West Palm for Ken LaVicka, and they should be available. If you are listening from South Florida, you probably already know, you can go to the away radio broadcast toggle on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. Thank you so much to both of those guys, so much for taking the time. Thank you to Sean Anderson behind the scenes for graphics, Hawk Harrelson, buttons, and all. I am Alex Campbell. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on CHGO Fire.
We all silly like the mayor.